At 9:27 a.m. on the 24th of March 2015, a plane got in contact.
Ah, ihr könnt das nicht lesen, ne?
The captain read back the air traffic controller's clearance at 9:30, allowing him to fly to an en route waypoint. Only a few minutes later, something was off. The control center in Marseille saw that the altitude for the aircraft was around 30,000 feet, almost 2,000 feet lower than the original cruise altitude, and declining. Marseille contacted the plane and asked what altitude the plane was cleared for, but they received no response at all. Over the next 30 seconds, Marseille tried to contact the flight crew 2 more times. No answer. At 9:34, the control center tried a different frequency, but again, no response.
Ja.
From 9:35 until 9:39, the Marseille Control Center tried to contact the flight crew multiple times over different frequencies. An air traffic controller from the French air defense system also tried, as well as another aircraft. But each time, no response from Germanwings Flight 9525.
Dann ist es passiert, ne?
At 9:40, radar contact was lost. The French air traffic controllers triggered a distress phase, declaring that the aircraft and its occupants were in imminent danger and required immediate assistance. At 9:41 a.m., Flight Germanwings 9525 crashed into the side of a mountain in the Alps. What happened? The crash occurred on a remote mountain. Because there was no access by road, emergency crew had to be brought in via helicopter. The plane was completely destroyed, the debris field vast, but the pieces of the craft small. The cockpit voice and flight recorder were found in the same week, although they were both severely damaged. When flight investigators stitched together the data, a story of intentional action formed. The plane was hijacked, but not by terrorists. Let's go back. After the aircraft leveled off at its cruise altitude, the captain left the cockpit to go to the bathroom at 9:30. While he was in the bathroom, the plane was almost immediately set for a different.
Das triggert mich immer, dass man im Englischen sagt Bathroom und man denkt immer als Deutscher, das wäre ein Wort wie Baderaum. Aber ist eigentlich Toilette. Hat mich immer getriggert, muss ich einfach mal so sagen. In der Schule damals so, habe ich gesagt, Toilette. Ist das englische Wort, aber nee, Bathroom heißt das. Ja, perfekt.
Altitude in the cockpit. At 9:34, the captain came back and requested access, but he got none. The door was locked. As he stood in front of that cockpit door, the captain began to understand. The co-pilot had hijacked the plane, and he had no way of getting in. After 2001, cockpits were changed in order to protect those flying the plane from.
Ey, vielen Dank für dein Follower. Nicht wundern, meine Mikrofonqualität, der Filter für die Rauschunterdrückung ist gerade an. Deshalb klinge ich nicht so, als würde ich halt, also klinge ich nicht so wie sonst.
Potential hijackers. To enter the cockpit, a crew member has to call the cockpit on the intercom and press the pound key on a keypad, which buzzes the cockpit. At that moment, the pilot can switch the door control from norm to unlock, and the crew member can enter. The crew is also given emergency codes, which they can use if there are concerns for those in the cockpit. In that case, the crew member will use the emergency code on the keypad, triggering a 30-second timer, and the cockpit door will open for 5 seconds.
Ja, wir schauen auf jeden Fall die neuen Channel, ne? Und das ist bisher jetzt schon sehr interessant, ne? Also gutes Konzept auf jeden Fall mit dem englischen Kanal.
However, there are situations where those in the cockpit want to override the access by the crew, like during a hijacking. In that situation, the pilots can switch the door control to lock, overriding all emergency access. And it's that mechanism that the co-pilot used to permanently lock access to the cockpit, while the plane began to descend. The captain was locked out of the cockpit without any control. At 9:39, the cockpit voice recorder picked up violent blows on the cockpit door. The captain had repeatedly tried breaking in to gain access, but the cockpit door was reinforced.
Ja, also als normaler Mensch schafft man auf jeden Fall niemals gegen diese Flugzeugtür. Niemals. Das ist auch beabsichtigt, ne? Und dieses Notfallcode hätte eigentlich normalerweise funktioniert, ne? Aber er hat es irgendwie komplett abgeschaltet irgendwie, ne? Dass man da reinkommt.
Made to withstand armed hijackers, the captain stood little chance. In the last minutes, the passengers, crew, and captain all knew that the plane was going down. No one survived the crash. 144 passengers, 4 cabin crew, and the captain and co-pilot died. Amongst the passengers was an entire school class returning from a field trip to Spain. The captain, Patrick Sondenheimer, was a 34-year-old father of 2. In the aftermath, his wife set up a foundation in his name, intended to help children and young people handle grief and crisis. He had thousands of total flight hours, and his last moments were dedicated to trying to save the plane and passengers. The co-pilot was 27 years old, and from a young age, he was passionate about flying.
Das ist sehr jung, ne? Muss man ganz ehrlich sagen. Ne? Mit 27 schon Co-Pilote zu sein. Ich kenne Lehrer, die sind 27. Also, das sind ja keine Lehrer, sondern Referendaren. Und die sind 27. Und er als Co-Pilot mit 27 ist schon sehr jung gewesen.
His bedroom had posters of Airbus, Boeing, and Lufthansa, and he'd become an expert glider pilot as a child. He joined Lufthansa's flight academy straight out of school, but only a few months into the program, he stopped.
Ich muss aber ganz kurz
He
abchecken.
was suffering, declaring that he was in remission. After a few months, his student pilot license and fit-to-fly medical certificate were restored.
Ey,
But
das
if
war
he
ein
needed
Fehler,
any
ne?
more psychiatric treatment, he'd be grounded from flying. But he
Das war
continued
so
with
ein
his
Fehler.
training until he ran into a problem. While filling out a document required by the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration to fly at an Arizona-based, Lufthansa-operated flight school, he said that he had never been diagnosed with any mental disorders. This was a lie, and he got caught. Lying on an FAA application can lead to a jail offense or the end of a flying career. But the FAA gave him a second chance. He
Das
admitted
war
to
so ein
depression
Fehler.
and was accepted to go to Arizona. In 2013, he joined Germanwings, a low-budget airline owned by Lufthansa. And a year later, his depression returned. He thought he was going blind, visiting ophthalmologists and neurologists multiple times per week because he was seeing stars, halos, flashes of light.
In diesem Moment, wo die das festgestellt haben, dass er depressiv war, konnte man das verhindern. Und eigentlich war es ja geplant, das wurde ja schon mal ja gesagt, ne? Eigentlich wollte er schon bereits, also es gab ja den Flug von ähm, Deutschland zu Mallorca und eigentlich wollte er den Flug von Deutschland zu Mallorca schon das machen, ne? Und am Ende war das leider der Flug von Mallorca zu Deutschland. Ach so, nee, okay, nicht Mallorca, Barcelona. Okay, Barcelona, genau, Barcelona. Auf jeden Fall wollte er es schon vorher schon machen und er hatte nicht die Chance gehabt, aber ab dem Zeitpunkt, wo der Kapitän, ne, auf die Toilette gegangen ist, hat er halt die Chance ergriffen, ne?
Streaks and flying insects. But the doctor's scans didn't find much. He was diagnosed with hypochondriacal disorder, as well as emergent psychosis from his family doctor. And that doctor urged him to go to a psychiatric clinic, but he'd do no such thing. Instead, in January of 2015, he returned to the psychiatrist that had helped him in the first place. He received psychotherapy and went on heavy antidepressants while continuing to work and fly. From February to March, he received multiple sick notes from multiple doctors. He wasn't all right, and he wanted something to change. 4 days before the crash, he turned to his computer to understand the locking mechanism on the Airbus A320 cockpit door. On his outbound flight from Düsseldorf to Barcelona,
Wie gesagt, der hat sich damit richtig befasst und vorbereitet. Er hat das wirklich komplett anders geplant. Das ist das Gefährliche daran.
he tested the descent settings for a moment while Sondenheimer was outside the cockpit. On the return flight, he used it to bring down the plane. Pilots are required to do health screenings and annual checkups, but mental health is easier overlooked than physical. Since pilots operate under an honor system, they're expected to self-evaluate their health. And this can be an issue. The co-pilot was declared unfit to work by his doctor, but he decided to just not tell his employer. But if someone
Dass man heutzutage, dass es heutzutage natürlich nach dem Vorfall überprüft wurde, zeigt auf jeden Fall, dass es auf jeden Fall, dass man daraus auf jeden Fall gelernt hat. Weil jetzt, nach dem Unfall, ne, gab es ja tatsächlich den Shitstorm erstmal, dass man das nicht als Arbeitgeber überprüft hat. Aber heutzutage ist es so, dass jedes Mal zweimal oder sogar dreimal drüber geschaut wird, ob er auch arbeitsfähig ist, ne? Und das ist halt so ein Punkt. Man lernt immer aus diesen Sachen. Und das finde ich erstmal einerseits gut und genau, das verhindert halt im Prinzip weitere Vorfälle.
like him is a risk to public safety, a doctor can break doctor-patient confidentiality and report him to authorities. So why didn't at least one of the multiple doctors who wrote multiple sick notes and declared him unfit to fly think that the co-pilot may have presented a risk for public safety? Enough of a risk that he couldn't be trusted to report himself. We don't know. The doctors may have believed the co-pilot was a risk to himself, but not to others. Being depressed does not make you a killer. Or maybe the doctors were just scared. Breaking doctor-patient confidentiality does not come without risks. It's even possible cultural factors could have played a role. Privacy and data protection are valued really highly in Germany. But trying to understand why doctor-patient
Ja, Datenschutz in Deutschland, das ist, daraus kann man eigentlich auch ein Video machen. Also, sehr viel Bürokratie hier und ganz wichtig, Datenschutz immer unterschreiben und 1000 Blätter extra ausdrucken, damit der Kunde einfach damit einverstanden ist, dass man ihn einfach mal in die Daten oder sowas zugreifen kann. Und das ist schon das Problem. Man macht so viel, also man macht es halt, also ja, okay, wie gesagt, daraus könnte man auch ein Video machen.
confidentiality wasn't broken is a dilemma and issue best left to healthcare professionals and ethics professors. And unfortunately, we're YouTubers. So we encourage you to read more about it in these articles. Nonetheless, when you're watching this today, it's important to understand that this type of incident is incredibly unlikely. In the aftermath, the European Aviation Safety Agency proposed multiple safety regulations.
Genau, jetzt erklärt er halt das, was ich eben gerade gesagt habe. Es gibt neue Vorschriften. Alles wird zweimal bis dreimal überprüft. Und genau.
Psychological screening for pilots increased, and multiple airlines adopted a two-person in the cockpit at all time rule, although Lufthansa has recently phased this out. In 2015, Germanwings was rebranded to Eurowings. The decision was made prior to the crash. In the end, Lufthansa compensated the families of the victims, but there are questions about whether it was enough. The families have faced losses that no money could ever heal. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. It was insanely hard to make. We love animation and deep research, but it's expensive. That's why we have sponsors on this channel. By the way, a lot of our animation in particular actually has a lot to do with math, be it geometry or linear algebra for specific shaders, or code for scripted and procedural animation. Both can be exciting and fascinating, especially if taught in a playful manner. That's where Brilliant comes in. It gives you skills that
Genau, jetzt kommen jetzt ganz Werbungen, dass sie dann halt, ne? So, aber man sieht auf jeden Fall, dass man daraus gelernt hat und dass man halt aus der ganzen Sache auf jeden Fall, ne, in der Zukunft das verändern kann.